Courageous and talented. I'm playing with the Takach Quartet 6 concerts. Japchae. Doldamki. Character. What's the difference between a violin and a viola? A viola burns longer. That's not very funny. 사랑해요.
이거 해야지. 뭐지 이거?
안녕하세요. 저는 리처드 용재원입니다. Welcome to my Club Balcony show. I hope you have a good time and enjoy it.
음악과 사람과 이야기가 있는 곳 클럽발코니쇼입니다.
안녕하세요. 클럽발코니쇼 10월호의 게스트는 비올리스트 리처드 용지원일입니다. 최근에 그래미상을 수상한 것도 있고 그리고 타카치 쿼르텐과 함께 내한을 해서 정말 금이환영이라고 얘기할 만큼 지금의 용지원일은 제2의 전성기라고 할 만큼의 어떤 활동을 하고 있습니다. 오늘 이 귀한 시간을 내서 저와 함께 얘기를 나눌 텐데요. 영어가 편하기 때문에 제가 한국어로 질문을 하면 나중에 영어에 대한 그 답변은 자막으로 처리하는 방식으로 인터뷰를 진행하도록 하겠습니다. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to 클럽발코니쇼. 예, 이번에 타카치 쿼르텐과 함께 내한 무대를 갖게 됐고 어제 그리고 내일 또 이제 계속 공연이 이어지고 있죠. 지금 최근에 그래미상 수상도 있었고 지금 요즘에 이 팬데믹 기간과 한 근 2년 용재원일에게는 어떤 시기인지 얘기를 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
Well, I think the pandemic started with you and our concert for KRETIA-TV, where we did one of my first performances
Yes.
playing for people
Yes.
in May of 2020. Our concert at 예술의 전당 with Inmo Young, and that was one of my first live concerts after the pandemic. It was my first, basically, my first big performance. So since then, it's been a month later, I joined the Takach Quartet,
Yeah.
and a year later, we won the Grammy, and the third year now, we've, I guess you could say we've returned to normal. We've had a full schedule. Besides Omicron, we had a completely, just a very, very busy schedule all across the world, Europe and America, and now here in Korea.
많은 사람들이 병 때문에 두려워해서 무대에 서는 것도 굉장히 꺼리고 극장에 찾는 것도 어려웠고 물론 이제 문이 닫히기도 했었지만 한국에 일부러 와서 격리 기간을 다 거치고 그리고 또 병원에 가서 의료진들을 위로하는 음악회도 하고 굉장히 그 사람들을 찾아가서 하는 음악회에 두려움 없이 이렇게 먼저 나서기도 하고 그랬었는데 어떤 생각으로 그런 자리를 이렇게 일부러 찾아가려고 적극적인 행동을 하신 건지에 대한 얘기를 듣고 싶습니다.
The medical sciences, even though we don't talk about it today because we're 3 years into the pandemic now and we almost take it for granted, but what the medical community did to help us through this pandemic was nothing short of a miracle. At the very beginning, doctors and nurses worldwide probably didn't sleep. They were taking care of
맞아요.
people, many people. And at Myungji Hospital, I know their COVID ward was so busy, and those doctors and nurses were incredible. I think I was more acutely aware of medicine because, my mom, I had spent a lot of time in doctor's offices and hospitals with my mom because she had, the year before COVID hit, we had her cancer treatments, and it was really, you start to really understand that we rely on our medical community. It's life or death often. It's so. I was so grateful to be able to do anything, for the doctors and nurses. The director of Myungji Hospital, Lee Wong-jun, is a violinist and a music lover and entrepreneur, medical sort of person, and he was very, very kind, and he made that trip very possible.
그 문이 닫힌 예술의 전당을 보면서 정말 연주자에게 무대라는 게 굉장히 중요하구나. 그리고 또한 무대를 채워준 관객이 얼마나 중요한가에 대한 생각도 많이 했을 것 같아요. 근데 그 임모 씨하고 같이 연주를 하면서도 굉장히 그 벅차하던 게 생각이 나거든요. 이 기간 동안에 연주자에게 무대란 어떤 의미인가라는 생각을 하셨는지.
I don't think there's anything that can replace live music. I think, you know, I came to music through umban, through recording, and I still listen constantly to recorded music, and it's wonderful because it's portable and you can take it anywhere. But that specialness of being in a room with an audience, it's a relationship because you play differently because people are receiving what you're doing, and it's a very tangible thing. It's not just like you play and then there's nobody in the audience because we did that, right? We did that in COVID. We did Zoom concerts and you playing to a hall and it's a one-way street. But a concert is really a two-way street. It really is. The way people listen influences the way one performs.
그럼 이제 다카치 콰르텟에 대한 이야기를 여쭤볼게요. 그 이제 세계 최고의 앙상블로서 이제 다카치 콰르텟과 함께 내한을 하게 됐습니다. 소감이 어떠신가요?
For so many years, I really wished the audience in Korea would embrace chamber music. Is it 실내음악? Yeah, and to now come back to Korea with the Takach is so meaningful because our program is very, very, very serious music. The same programs are playing at the Wigmore and the Musikverein and Berlin, the Concert House. These are the same programs. So the fact that we are bringing very, very serious music to all over Korea is very meaningful to me. It means that for all of the work we did to try to share, I think we've built a community of people that really want to receive the music.
그 어떤 팀인지에 대한 얘기를 본인의 입으로 좀 듣고 싶어요. 그러니까 세계적으로 얼마나 위상이 있는 그런 팀인지, 그리고 어떤 과정을 통해서 여기에 같이 합류하게 된 건지도 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
Maybe I'll start with how. You know, when I was a grad student at the Juilliard School, I got a call from our first violinist, Edward Dusenberry, saying, Richard, you've been highly recommended as a young artist. Would you audition for us? So I went to their fancy hotel in Manhattan and we rehearsed and they auditioned me, and about 3 weeks afterwards I got a call from Ed saying, sorry, you're too young and you know, but we think you're a fabulous violist and we want you to pursue your career in Korea and your recording contract with Universal. So fast forward 2018, I got a call from them again saying, would you audition again? You know, and I you know, sometimes it's like, fool me once, you know, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So I was like, maybe I should just say, no, thank you. My life is great, you know. But you know, the Takach is really in a world now where all of the great quartets that I grew up with, just this year, the Emerson Quartet is finishing. So a lot of these quartets that I grew up, they have retired. It's a fragile ecosystem, a quartet. So I'm really, they chose me and I accepted, even though it is not without compromise, but it's worth it. Ed is our leader. He's first violin, and Ed is he's such an amazing genius, because, you know, there's many ways to lead, but sometimes leading can be dictating. You can be just so assertive that you don't welcome other opinions. And in a quartet, that's death, right? You need everybody to contribute. And Ed has this way of facilitating everybody so that they have their voice. All the while, I mean, he has very strong feelings himself, but he really is a great, great leader. And I might also add, he's also a great writer. And
yes.
he comes, his mother is a Shakespeare, one of the world's Shakespeare scholars, and his father, African-American slavery, post-slavery. So he comes from a very, very academic family from Cambridge and Leamington Spa, near the Old Globe. And he's very excellent. Harumi, I've known for a long time because we're the same age. And Harumi's father was the violist of the Juilliard Quartet and was one of my big heroes. And also, her dad really championed me when I was a young artist. A lot of young artists, when you start out like I do, nobody knows who you are. You come from Sequim, Washington, and you audition for like Marlboro Music Festival, and you go to Lincoln Center, and who's this kid? I've never heard of a Richard O'Neill, but Sam, her father, had heard me, and he remembered what I played, and he was like, I like that boy. So I have a very long history with her father. Harumi and I started to play together in 2001, and we toured the United States for a few years with Marlboro. So, and we were also young artists at Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society together, which is a very prestigious thing in the early 2000s. And then Harumi's life progressed on, and my life progressed on. And then we met again when I auditioned for the quartet, and I'm very proud of her. She's an amazing personality. Sometimes I think it's very hard when you're the daughter or a son of someone that's famous, right? Because you live under their shadow.
That's
like,
her.
Are you just their daughter? Everybody but she really she's her own very distinct, strong personality. Incredibly bright, incredibly passionate. And then our namesake cellist, Andras Feher, maybe not our namesake, but our original Hungarian member who has seen everything. He is the
Original member.
And he is the foundation, our literal, not only sound foundation of the quartet, but sort of our foundation just by who he is. He's a magical, humorous, mysterious, and amazing musician. I mean, the cellist in a string quartet, I think the cellist often is perhaps the most important person because they lay down the foundation of sound, and he has such an amazing gravity to his music making. And he comes from an era in music history in Hungary at the Liszt Academy. I mean, you think about the 1970s, 1960s, of all of the great Hungarian musicians, George Solti, Andras Schiff, they're all Hungarians,
right.
and János Starker, they all sort of were like the best musicians in the world. And I don't know what it was at that time in Budapest, but there was a special way of playing, and there was also a special way of teaching. And I think Andras has that. Every rehearsal I have with Andras, I feel like is a music lesson. Because just the way he makes sound and just the way what he chooses to say. I think in a string quartet, that's often, you have to be very careful of what you say and what you don't say. Because sometimes what you don't say is more important than what you say. And sometimes when you say something, it really steers the group in one direction. So you don't want to be too direct, but you don't also want to be indirect, because otherwise nobody will know.
Right.
But it's such a weird balance. It's often been called like a marriage, right? A marriage of four people. And the joke is that it's a marriage with no benefits, I would argue that there is the benefit that you make music together, but it's a complicated relationship between four personalities, four very distinct personalities. And the Takach celebrates uniqueness. some quartets really want everybody to be homogenous, everybody the same this, same this. The Takachis always celebrated individual personalities. So we play very distinctly differently, but there's something about, we listen very deeply always, not just with this, but we listen here and we listen here. And that allows the quartet to have its uniqueness, I think.
이런 농담 있잖아요. 콰르텟은 서로 다 사이가 안 좋다고. 유명한 콰르텟. 그 호텔도 따로 가고 싶고 난 비행기도 따로 타고 싶고. 근데 타카치는 굉장히 사이가 좋은 것 같아요.
It's sort of, you know, the Guarneris were famous for that. They hated each other. I mean, their rehearsals, they yelled and the second violinist, when you would go on tour, he would just disappear. He wouldn't tell where he was staying. You didn't know. The Takach, we don't sit together on the plane. Well, sometimes we do. Like if it's, you know, sometimes we sit together, but we're very independent, but we're also not, during the pandemic, they were basically my family. I didn't see anybody. I mean, we were rehearsing without masks, so we couldn't be going out, and nobody was going out, but we were still trying to work, so we had to keep a very tight bubble. So it's a good balance between privacy and maintaining individuality, but also I'm lucky everyone's nice, because a lot of quartets, people aren't nice, and it makes a difference. When people are not nice, it makes things difficult.
그 사람들이 용재 씨를 선택한 것도 용재 씨가 되게 나이스해서 선택하지 않았을까. 물론 실력이 뒷받침되는 건 당연하지만
In a way, when you win an audition in a quartet, it's a mix between a complicated decision and a simple decision. The simple decision is, is this going to work? Do you want to see this person for the next 10 years, 20 years?
No.
Or are you going to hate them? And I think one thing I've learned is music making is very specific, but the deletion of the ego is very important. I mean, there might be room for narcissism in parts of society, like in entertainment, a lot of times narcissists are celebrated, right? If they're very vain and they have confidence and their charisma, and that's great. In a quartet, not so good, right? Because if you have somebody that's selfish and always wants to be the diva or the divo and always me, it's like, that's major boo. And there are a lot of musicians that are very narcissistic. You know, I think I know a lot of them, but it's fine. But in a quartet, I think you choose somebody that's going to work together, you know. I think that's often, chamber music is collaborative, but you'd be surprised how many times it's not collaborative. People don't want to collaborate. They want to be themselves, and they want you to just bend your way, and that's not going to work.
이렇게 그래서 이 질문을 드리고 싶은데, 그러니까 용재 씨는 해마다 2,000석 되는 그 예술의 전당을 매진을 시킬 정도로 관객들에게 사랑받는 비올리스트고, 이게 해외에서도 이런 경우는 정말 너무 드물어요. 근데 이제 TV에서 인간극장이라는 프로그램을 통해서 대중에게도 알려졌고, 그래서 혹시 그 대중 인지도 때문에 이렇게 인기가 있는 게 아닌가라는 그 조금은 평가절하되는 부분이 없지 않았을 것 같아요. 물론 이제 타카치 콰르텟이라던가 그래미상을 받으면서 그 모든 것들이 좀 더 불식시켜졌다라고 생각이 드는데, 이제 혼자 생각을 했을 때 나는 이런 대중의 어떻게 보면 스타의 이미지도 있는 솔리스트이기도 한데, 음악적으로는 굉장히 이런 그 좀 더 주변 사람들 얘기는 다 학구적이고 음악에 대해서 굉장히 열심이라는 그런 얘기는 있었지만, 요런 사이에 이 조율을 하는 게 굉장히 어려웠을 것 같아요. 그 음악적인 것을 더 채우기 위한 연주자로서의 고민, 그리고 관객들과의 소통을 계속 끌고 갈 수 있는 어떤 또 다른 면의 연주자로서의 고민, 이런 게 둘이 부딪혔을 것 같은데, 좀 그런 걸 조율하는 점 어떻게 해왔는지 20년 동안 그게 좀 궁금합니다.
You know, one thing that I found very interesting recently is our Van Cliburn winner, Im Yoon-chan,
Yes.
Who's 18 years old.
18.
And when he was interviewed after winning the Van Cliburn, you know, I was very moved because he was talking about the craft, you know, about that he wants to go in the mountains, something like he wants to go in the mountains. And I was very touched to hear a young artist say that they cared about music that much and not being famous. And I think it goes back down to something that, you know, you mentioned in Ganggukjang, you know, like, I'm honestly just happy every morning I wake up. Seriously, I'm happy because, I mean, who would have thought? I mean, it's been all a dream. It's all a dream. But at the center of that dream is this thing called music, you know, however you define music, what is it? You know, it's so great, music, right? It's just, it's beyond all of us, right? It comforts, it inspires, it's all of humanity and creation, all in this organized sound, you know. And to me, I've always loved it more than anything, and I've recognized that I'm not the genius ever, right? You know, Mozart, he's a genius.
Yeah.
Beethoven, he's a genius. Bach, maybe the biggest genius, but that's the real genius. You know, I'm just a servant of these people. You know, and I realize I'm not a composer. I'm a terrible composer, but the music itself is worth everything because it's so important. And the opportunity, you know, everybody has things in life, and everyone gets genius sent to them in different things, and you're given the opportunity to potentialize, right? To build yourself up. And music for me was my way of building myself up, right? The music and the musicians helped me, it elevated me way beyond whatever I ever thought. So this whole idea of a celebrity, that's fine. But in music, really what we should celebrate is the music itself, really. It's long after we die and we're in the ground, or, you know, the music will still be there. So therefore, why should we focus on us? You know, again, it's about, is it a narcissistic thing? Perhaps, maybe it's slightly narcissistic, but I think in general there's more of a truth, this language, this universal language that I can go anywhere, I can get on a plane and basically go anywhere in the world and take out my viola and play, and people get something. I mean, that's worth living for. So going back to Yunchan, I mean, I think it's that sort of thought, I think, has always been there for me. You know, it's like the temptation for a lot of young artists, I think, is that fame and fortune is the goal. But I would say it's never the goal. You know, it's a byproduct, and it's a very nice byproduct. but the real goal is, are people getting music? Are you getting on stage, and are people receiving the music? Are they really, like he played that Rachmaninoff third piano concerto in the final round. It was just, you could be a music lover, you could be a non-music lover. It was phenomenal, phenomenal. I mean, the most dastardly difficult things, just easy. And he had this sort of youthful flair where he'd sort of do this, and that was fun, but it wasn't showing off. It was just, he was having a good time, and you could tell. So that gift from the universe that gave him that nth of a percentage of anybody that's lived that could play at that level. You think, is that gift so he can get, you know, a Bugatti and live in a mansion? No, it's so he can play for us, for all of us, for me, for you, for everybody, and he can just show you that there's something more. You know, there's something greater out there than just, you know, the mundane. You know, I think that's what art's for. It connects us and it inspires us, and it's superhuman, but it's very human at the same time.
You're also the Yunchan lover.
You know, he came to Boulder. To the Van Cliburn series. You know, when they win, they play everywhere in the world. But he came to my school where I teach, where we play the Takashis in residence, and I was like, I have to be in. We had our first concert in Japan, so we had to leave. But I was like, I've bought tickets to all of his concerts that I can, but I haven't been able to go. But he's phenomenal. I mean, he's really great.
이번에는 이제 그래미상에 대한 얘기를 짚고 넘어갈게요. 이게 팬데믹 기간 동안에 있었기 때문에 사실 방탄소년단 그래미 노미네이션과 그리고 후보에만 올랐다는 것 가지고 이제 화제가 많이 됐지만 이 클래식에서 그것도 비올라가 그래미상을 수상했다는 거는 다 오케스트라 그 앨범들과 같이 견주어서 이건 정말 대단한 일인 것 같은데 이 그 비올라에게 위대한 날이다 라는 수상 소감이 인상적이었습니다. 이 일이 얼마나 대단한 일인지에 대한 얘기를 직접 좀 소개를 해주셨으면 좋겠어요.
It's significant for me because if I were to be really honest, when I first was starting out, I can't tell you how many people, big managers, publicists in London and New York, I would meet with them and there's like, Richard, you're really great, but you're a violist and we can't make any money off of you, so we can't sign you. And it was really crushing to me. It was like, the viola is such a great instrument.
맞아요.
You know, look what we've done here in Korea. People, give it a chance. But so many people just shut me down. And it was really debilitating. You know, it was like, I'm doing my best. I'm playing my heart out. I've worked my whole life. I'm dead serious. I want the chance to play. But the manager's like, no. And my teacher, Juilliard, warned me of that. He said, Richard, if you want to be a soloist, good luck.
아, 정말.
You know, good luck. You probably won't be able to make it. He basically told me that my first month at Juilliard. It's like,
But you have a luck.
well, you know, how many years later? 16 years after my first Grammy nomination, I get my first win. And how many 20 years after my debut here, I get my validation as a soloist. It takes a long time. And I'm still playing, you know, it's not like I'm retired, you know, so I still can play the viola, but it's just, I think the world is slow to change sometimes. I fear sometimes in our realm of what we call classical music that there's this tendency to always want to hear the same things over and over again. The same Brahms symphonies, the same Beethoven symphonies, you know, the same concertos. And so it's, rather than having our art form expand and becoming wider, we're sort of becoming more inward. And I worry about that because a lot of things in the world, that's not evolution, that's sort of devolution in my opinion. You know, we need to, it has to be an evolving thing always. So the viola being validated at the Grammys and following in my friend Kim who has been a lot. Yeah, Kim is a friend and I love her and I love what she's done for the viola. Talking about influence, Kim's albums of the Hindemith sonatas when I was a kid, that was one of my favorite things. I mean, Hindemith sonatas, I mean, oh my gosh, that's like, ooh, Hindemith. No, but her solo recordings on ECM, which is a fabulous label, as you know, and her playing with Robert Levin, it gave me inspiration. So hopefully now, you know, how many, you know, she won like a decade ago maybe,
Yes.
you know, or less than a decade, but a while, you know, hopefully now, there are all these young violists now that I hope that they will go way beyond where I am and managers and presenters will believe in the power that the viola is. It is a really great solo instrument. It has no need for apologies.
사실 근데 비올라를 중심으로 한 좋은 작품들이 작곡가들이 많이 안 만든 것도 사실 있었을 것 같아요. 근데 지금 이번에 수상을 하게 된 테오파니디스 작품은 최근 작품이고 그리고 최근에 일어난 일들을 가지고 쓴 곡이기 때문에 이런 작품들이 좀 더 많이 나타났으면 좋겠는데 어떤 작품인지에 대한 소개를 좀 부탁드릴게요.
We have to thank Kim Kashkashian again because the piece by Chris was written for her originally. It was written during 9/11, during and around 9/11. Chris was living in New York, and as was I, when the World Trade Center was attacked.
Yes.
I know people talk about events like here in Korea, like the Sewol-ho was very, very tragic, and it defined the people that witnessed, and that pain it's one of those moments. For I think Americans, I think living in New York, 9/11 was really probably one of the worst memories in my life, and it was shared by all those that were living around that. And I meet young people now, and they don't know because it's so detached. They heard about it, but they have no personal connection. Right. But I can still smell how it smelled. I could still see the subways filled with these hundreds of leaflets saying, "Where is my wife?" or "Where is my husband? Where's my daughter?" They were on this floor of the Trade Center, and it was really just one of the most horrible things. And Chris was able to sort of somehow take all of that pain and tragedy and not make it too direct, but still honor what had happened. I think that's the hard thing in art. If it's too literal, sometimes it's not art, right? It's just like watching the news, right? You know, you can't, art is this weird thing where events and experience go through the prism of the composer or the performer, right? It goes through this prism, and when it's refracted out of the prism, it has that magical transformation. And I think this piece has a real magical transformation. It goes from incredible darkness and a quotation in the third movement from the Yankee Stadium peace ceremony, where the sheik started to sing the solo line, and it was very moving, because at the time in New York there was a lot of racism. You know, these events happen, and people are angry, so people lashed out. There's a whole bunch of horrible things that happened to Muslims and all over, you know, the world. But it was just this knee-jerk reaction, and to have a sheik get up there and sing this peaceful incantation was very meaningful. Writing a concerto, you know, sometimes I think people think of a concerto and they think of Paganini and they think of like show off and pyrotechnics and wow and like paksu and all that stuff. I think a concerto in modern terms is why, like anything, why should it exist, right? I think a concerto is a vehicle for the instrument to show, but I think what Chris was able to do was he was able to make the viola do what it does best. It made the viola become the sort of the human aspect of the piece. So in the first movement, the viola is this Native American dancer. It's like this primitive, guttural, energetic, unstoppable movement. In the second movement, the viola is a philosopher. It's looking out to the universe and saying, why, basically, why? And getting no answer. Third movement, the viola is basically the sheik. The viola is the peaceful enabler that starts out with tremendous agony and has this incredible cadenza by itself, and then it invites the orchestra in this hymn, and which ends up in the fourth movement, which is an explosion of the whole piece, where basically the viola sets the whole orchestra on fire, and the piece has this absolution. So I think of all the modern viola concertos, it's really, really great. I mean, I'm talking about it a lot, but I wish more people would play it, because it's a very, very powerful piece of music.
예전에 빠질 사이의 첼로 협주곡을 듣고 너무 눈물이 났어요. 이게 정말 그 내전이 일어나고 있는 상황이 눈앞에 보이는 것 같아서 정말 그 현대 작품들이 어떻게 보면 지금의 현실을 우리하고 더 가깝게 만들어내는 것 같았고, 근데 그 첼로라는 울림이 그 앉아있는 사람의 모습과 같아 보였고, 그런 면에서도 비올라라는 악기가 내성부에 있는 악기인 만큼 좀 더 속에 있는 이야기를 더 많이 해주는 악기인 것 같은데, 이런 질문을 해보고 싶어요. 원래 바이올린을 하다가 비올라로 바꿨잖아요. 왜 비올라를 다시 선택하게 됐어요? 그 선생님들이 너는 운이 좋아야 좀 잘 할 수 있다, 무대에 많이 설 수 있다, 이런 얘기를 했음에도 불구하고 왜 비올라를 선택했을까요?
Well, I think, physically, I think the viola was good for me, because
long.
when I was a boy, not irrelevant, but you know, when you're growing up in America, you know, you're around a lot of 외국인 or white people, right? And they're bigger, right? I mean, the boys are bigger, you know, and I was sort of like this skinny, little, small, and Asian boy, and then I turned, you know, a certain age, and I just like, and I remember my violin teacher. I was good for violin because I was small, and I was sort of, you know, very narrow fingers, and all of a sudden I got really just like I just exploded out, and so my teacher was like, you just look horrible when you play the violin now. And I remember picking up the viola, and it was like, this feels good because, and I think it is the viola. There are attributes, I think, to playing instruments. Like pianists often talk about how big the length of this distance is, because it makes a difference. If you can hit an octave or a tenth or like Rachmaninoff like that, I mean, it makes a difference. With viola, I think you don't want to feel like you're straining to play the instrument. And a lot, I think that's why I think when I first picked up the viola, I was like, this really feels good. Cellists, I think sometimes they need to have, double bass players, they need to have very large pads on their hands, because when they block the string, it needs to, it's vibrating underneath, so you need to have some coverage. But with viola, you don't need to have that big of a pad, but you need to be able to get around it. So I think my love affair with the viola started first and foremost because I was comfortable with it. And then second, viola, when you look at string quartet repertoire, it's a treasure of viola writing. Because if you're to think about composition as a pianist would, you know, let's say this is first violin, second violin, viola, cello, right? Like 4 voice writing, right? So a lot of composers, this thumb writing, the tenor thumb, like if you think of Brahms, I think they had really good tenor thumb writing. So a lot of viola lines are actually very, very interesting and strong, just because of the nature of the way the piano works. It's funny because, I mean, in the piano thinking, you know, the weakest fingers are the strongest, the lowest note and the highest note. So actually that's sort of, but then the inner voices often are the strongest. So I think some composers really, it's interesting to me to think about composition as a pianist, but like a lot of the composers were great pianists, and they conceptually think of music in that way. But going back to the viola, I think a lot of the greatest repertoire is in chamber music for the viola.
그 예전에 제가 2016년에 나온 책인데 나와 당신의 베토벤이라는 책, 거기에서 읽어보니까 그 좀 아까 얘기했던 것처럼 작고 왜소하고 좀 사람 낯을 가렸던 그런 소년이 사람들하고 같이 있을 때는 큰 사람들한테 막 괴롭힘도 당하고 그래서 울기도 하고 그랬었다고 하는데, 그 비올라를 가지고 연주를 할 때면 내가 굉장히 괜찮은 사람처럼 되는 것 같고, 그리고 모든 시름이 다 잊어버리게 됐다, 이런 얘기가 있어서 굉장히 좀 인상적이었는데, 사실 그 그래미상 같은 것도 받고, 그래서 비올라라는 악기를 일으켜 세운 것이 또 용재 씨라고 생각을 하지만, 한편으로는 그 성장 과정에서 비올라가 또 용재 씨를 살려냈다라는 생각도 드는데, 이 악기가 많이 의지됐던 순간을 좀 얘기를 해줄 수 있을까요?
One might argue that the special moments in life are not the big events like the Grammy or an Emmy or a big New York Times review. That the most meaningful things in life are the small things. And I might add to that, I think the most meaningful things sometimes in life are the things that you visit constantly, that you keep on coming back to. It's like this circular event, right? We're periodic beings. We wake up and the universe is circular, everything's circular, right? But there's something about the practice of playing an instrument that's very, very, it's as primal as having to work the land for your food or wake up in the morning. I think every day you have to visit the instrument. You can't forget the instrument. You can't neglect it. It's not one of those things like you put money into a bank account and at a certain money you just take all the money out. No, it's like you put the money into the bank account and then you wake up the next day and a lot of that money is gone. It's gone. All that capital of your work. I might have played a great concert last night, but I wake up the next morning. That's not okay. I have to start over again. I have to put money into the bank. And a lot of that money is just physically investing yourself in this process. So the most special moments with the viola, often for me, are when I first take the viola out of the case. It's just like this thing that's so second nature. I could play the viola better than I could probably talk in the middle of the night, right? I can take the viola out of the case and I've trained myself that it's so familiar. Every part of that bow, every part of the fingerboard, I've spent tens of thousands of hours, so many, probably hundreds of thousands of minutes, maybe millions now, like in just getting to know it. So it's a very, that process. For a string player, we get that vibration right under our ear and it vibrates our chin and we feel it in our fingers. And there's something about when the bow hits the string, it just sort of feels like home to me. It just feels right because I'm so used to doing it. And I think the payoff is that sound is right next to you. It's right there, you know. I think great instruments, you hope that the great instruments, the great old Italian instruments, that sound travels and your audience hears the same sound that you do. But there's nothing like having that proximity of the sound right here. It's a very intimate thing. It's just like right under your ear. And that process that you're physically moving your body, but then this transformational sound hopefully comes out. You know, I think that's what we're all striving for. Because of course the process is much more difficult than that, right? You can easily just take the viola out and yank the bow and it sounds bad. But that process of what do I conceive the sound to be? What do I feel the sound to be? What do I think the sound to be? How am I going to make that happen? Do it and have it come out all in an instant. That takes a lifetime of work and it's not easy. It's one of those things you just have to keep on doing because one little millimeter wrong here, the audience is like, boo, boo, like you miss a millimeter, boo, you're terrible. You know, miss a millimeter here, shake, squeak, boo, right? So it's like, you're dealing with small little things, like millimeters matter on string instruments. It's not like I have a wide variance of error, right? It's really, really exposed. So you have to, it's a lot of work, but it's the best thing I do. I mean, it's really, I'm proud of it and I'm proud of it because I own it. I own it because I spend a lot of, all my time basically putting that money in the bank, the money of the bank of playing this instrument well, practicing.
요즘도 마라톤 하시나요?
My marathon career?
Yeah.
Oh, a few years ago I had an unfortunate accident. So I hurt on my ankle. So running has been more of a challenge, but I still try to run a little bit.
그때 왜 마라톤에 도전을 하게 됐고 그리고 달리는 만큼 이 기금이 모이는 성금이 모이는 그런 활동도 했었는데 마라톤을 이렇게 꾸준히 뛰는 것들을 보면서 굉장히 용재 씨가 꾸준한 사람이라는 생각도 했었어요. 연주 커리어도 그렇고 어떤 사람의 캐릭터도 그렇고 참 꾸준한 사람이다. 그리고 여기 계시는 동료분들이나 20년 동안 가까이 봤던 사람들이 다들 참 한결같다. 그런 얘기를 많이 하거든요. 자기 관리에 대한 철학 같은 걸 마지막으로 묻고 좀 마칠까 하는데 얘기를 좀 들려주세요.
If you love something, you are willing to run away at the first moment, right? When things get difficult, right? So I think if you love being a musician, that means that you really are in for a long journey. And, you know, talking about marathons, which is, that's a long journey, or a musical career, that's a long journey. You have to be ready to be patient, and you have to really learn how to accept failure and move on, and how to strive for perfection, or not strive for perfection. Perfection is the wrong word. Strive for excellence. Always strive for excellence, but also realize that sometimes you're going to fall short. Actually, every time you're going to fall short, but to not get discouraged because you didn't achieve what you wanted, but to try harder the next time, you know, and to empathize with others, I think is important, because if one doesn't feel what other people feel, then why are you even a musician? You know, why would you want to be a musician if you don't understand how other people feel? Because even though the music isn't tangibly, or it's not a causation, let's say, it's not causation. Maybe it's correlation, right? It's like the music is something, but it's not necessarily is that, but it has all these sort of effects. So I think if you don't understand what humanity is and all of its complexity, you know, all of the goods, not the good, but all of the pain, all of the happiness, how it's all related, I don't know why people would want to be in the arts, because that's your reward, right? Is to be involved in those sorts of big truths.
이 얘기들 너무 좋았던 것 같아요. 그냥 정말 오늘 나눴던 얘기가 다 좋았고, 그리고 그 용재훈일의 인생도 그렇고 음악도 그렇고, 그러니까 완전히 빛나는 단거리 주자가 아니라 오래도록 꾸준히 그 호흡을 유지하면서 나의 그 지향점을 찾아서 뭐 위기가 찾아와도 그거에 대해서 좋은 점을 봐가면서 이렇게 나아가는 그런 마라톤 주자처럼, 장거리 연주자처럼, 장거리 주자처럼 그렇게 인생을 살아왔고, 결국은 지금 이제 다카치 카르텐과 함께 세계 무대에서 한 80회 가까이 연주를 하는 그런 바쁜 연주자가 됐는데, 이렇게 꾸준히 달려온 그런 인생에도 박수를 보내고, 그리고 앞으로 또 달려나갈 그런 인생에도 박수를 보내면서 오늘 인터뷰를 마치려고 합니다. 인터뷰 내용 괜찮으셨어요? 하고 싶은 말씀 다 하셨나요?
No, you've been so wonderful. Thank you for all your sensitive questions.
sensitive question. 아무튼 내일 또 연주회가 있고 앞으로도 계속 연주회가 있는데, 이렇게 시간 내주셔서 정말 깊은 얘기를 해주셔서 너무 감사드리고, 인터뷰를 하면서 그리고 용재훈일에 대해서 다시 보게 됐다는 생각을 또 많이 했습니다. 그간에 꾸준히 쌓아온 것이 여기까지 왔다는 생각을 들어서 용재훈일을 보면서도 많이 배웠고요. 그리고 앞으로도 계속 그 여정에 박수를 보내면서 음악회를 꾸준히 찾도록 하겠습니다. 너무 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
We have one
Shut up and sit down. Just smile. Oh, that was something quick.
We're gonna let you know when the speed quiz starts.
Sit down and shut up.